Hello, back in the control center. We're going to finish this research paper off understanding and self regulation, part 3. So we left off at self awareness. So I'm going to pick up right here. Self awareness. Some people are more aware of their private selves or internal states than others. Researchers have explored differences in self awareness of internal states under the label of self consciousness. Those high in private self consciousness are very aware of their beliefs, moods, and feelings and are highly reflective. In contrast, persons high in public self consciousness are more aware of the self as a social object. They are highly concerned with their appearance and with the impression they are likely to make on others. To date, no investigations of this phenomenon have been conducted with children, but it is likely that marked differences in the self consciousness of adults have their roots in strategies developed in middle childhood. One could hypothesize, for example, that those highest in public self consciousness might have been most adept at early regulation of this behavior to meet the behavioral standards in others. Snyder studied another aspect of self awareness, that of self monitoring. Self monitoring refers to how much attention and value an individual accords to standards that are suggested by the environmental context. Snyder demonstrated significant differences in the social behavior of high and low self monitors. Again, this phenomenon has not been explored specifically with children, but the origins of this individual difference could be examined by combining Snyder's ideas with the extensive theorizing of self monitoring in the literature on self regulation. Self presentation. Jones and his colleagues studied differences among individuals in the strategies that they use to present themselves to others. Some presentation strategies involved individuals shaping their behaviors to create desired impressions for themselves and specific persons within the social environment. These strategies can be of either a self enhancing or self handicapping nature. They might be aimed at maintaining a particular self image or at changing one's own or another's image of the self. The ultimate goal is to control others' impressions or attributions of oneself. This sometimes may take maladaptive forms. Sorry. Research regarding self handicapping, for example, suggests that some people regulate their behavior by selecting those circumstances for actions that are most likely to render performance feedback ambiguous, which protects their private views of themselves from unequivocal negative feedback. Such stages might have their origins in middle childhood and may be particularly important in examining scholastic underachievement. Children who are concerned about their own competence, but whose view of their competence is uncertain or low, may be more likely to deliberately underachieve than are their self-assured peers. The outcome is a less than best effort that invites failure, but also provides an attributable out. I didn't try hard enough. Regarding this question of competence, however, both of the theoretical and the empirical support undergirding these notions are adult-based and devoid of developmental specification. Variations in the social system. With respect to potential variation in the nature of the social system, a number of factors have received empirical attention. For the most part, variables that influence the nature of the social environment experienced by the child, including social status, gender, family configuration, and child rearing practices, have been analyzed primarily with respect to the influences on self esteem. Their influence on all other aspects of the self concept is yet to be investigated. Social class. Researchers have focused on the relationship between social class and self concept, have been uniformly impressed with the potential for this variable to have a powerful influence on self. Social class is a critical determinant of experience and expectations. Social class can moderate the content of one's self understanding, the nature of one's knowledge, and about the social world. Sorry. Social class can moderate the content of one's self understanding, the nature of one's knowledge about the social world, and the content and nature of the particular rules, standards, and strategies that an individual develops in the course of socialization. This is due in part to the tendency of children to base their self concepts on compassions with others in terms of possessions, skills, and accomplishments. Lower income children have fewer possessions. They also have less opportunity to develop their abilities. They're less likely to feel that they are efficacious or control over their futures, and maybe less likely to try hard, thus accomplishing less. Despite its origin in the social system, the meaning of importance of social class to a child must be assessed from the perspective of the child. Rosenberg provides one of the most compelling statements in this view. One cannot understand the significance of a social structure variable for the individual without learning how the variable enters his experiences and is processed within his own phenomenal field. If we hope to appreciate the meaning of social class, or for that matter, the meaning of any social identity element, such as race, gender, or religion, for the child, it is essential to see social class from his perspective, or his viewpoint. To adopt the child's eye view of stratification, to understand how it enters his experiences and is internally processed. To the sociologist, social class means differential prestige, respect, possessions, and power with obvious self-esteem implications. But from the viewpoint of the child, the matter appears entirely different. Unfortunately, virtually all the research on the effects of social class has been concerned not with the child's view of stratification, but almost exclusively with self-esteem. The vast majority of the research has found on relationship between academic achievement and self-esteem. Berkeley, for example, has shown a consistent relationship between these two variables, as well as a relationship between social class and academic achievement. One of the most systematic studies of social class and the self conducted in Baltimore and Chicago, Rosenberg explored the relationship between socioeconomic status and global self-esteem and attempted to see if children actually perceived their social class standing. No association was found between social class and self-esteem among 8 to 11-year-olds. A modest association was found among adolescents, and a somewhat stronger one was seen among the adults. The lack of relationship between social status and self-esteem in the middle childhood is probably explained by the fact that the children at this age are seldom exposed to class-related social experiences, such as occupational discrimination. Issues surround social class may not be important in middle childhood as they are later in life. This view holds that children of this age are relatively protected from categorizations and judgments based on social class standing, particularly if the child grows up in a relatively homogeneous social environment. Homogeneous. As Rosenberg pointed out, the individuals in the environment of the school-age child and the ones most likely to affect the child's self-esteem are usually the same social standings as the child. Under most conditions, these individuals do not stress social class in their interactions with the child. In contrast, the reflected appraisals received by adults position them squarely in social space. Ethnicity. What happens when a child's social world becomes both a minority and a majority group, thereby increasing the salience of ethnicity in social class for the child? Viewing oneself as different from the majority group could conceivably lead to low self-esteem, especially when the majority group is the object of intense discrimination within the larger society. This notion was taken as self-evident by early investigators of the problem and received some support. Yet, many recent investigations of the relationship between minority group status and self esteem, including a comprehensive review by Wiley, do not support this conclusion. Nonetheless, ethnicity remains a controversial and contested area of research. Rosenberg, in 79, for example, concluded that the self esteem of Blacks will suffer only in those circumstances in which Blacks actually use whites as a comparison group. His study indicates that Black students who interacted primarily with whites and compared themselves unfavorably with whites experienced reduced self-esteem. Most Black children, however, interacted primarily with other Black children, and their self-evaluations based on comparisons within their relevant social group do not create in them a minority or low status view of themselves. Isn't that interesting? Well, that's definitely a direct energy weapon being used at the moment. Research in this area, as in that of the affected social class, needs to focus on the child's perceptions of his or her social environment to go beyond studies that center on self-esteem. While self-esteem may not be influenced by either ethnicity or social class, it is indeed plausible that these factors will be reflected in the content of self-knowledge and in the nature of children's motives, goals, plans, and strategies. Other social system variables. A number of studies have investigated the relationship between a variety of other aspects of the social system and the content and function of the self-concept during middle childhood. But again, not in any systematic or comprehensive fashion. Little is known, for example, about the relationship between styles of parenting and the nature of self-concept. The work on understanding contingencies and acquiring behavioral rules stresses the importance of consistency in the behavior of others in the social environment and the clarity in which the goals are modeled or presented. Unpredictability and inconsistency appear to cause some anxiety and confusion in the child, but the mediating links have not been specified. Similarly, poor supervision and parenting have been related to behavior problems in middle childhood. Specifying the relationship between these types of variables and compliance, as well as the internalization of behavior standards, creates a number of intriguing problems for researchers. The relationship between social system variables, such as gender and family configuration and self-concept, could be further examined. Family configuration, your birth order, your family size, your sex composition provides the child's most meaningful social environment for a substantial period of his or her life. Many aspects of the self system, particularly those regarding strategies for managing one's own behavior in relationship to others and modes of social comparison, may be influenced by whether one is the firstborn or the later born child and whether one lives in a small or large family. Somebody emphasized the potential importance of family configuration as a social environment variable, but he explored it only in relation to intellectual performance. I think this is brilliant because this is what we talk about a lot, isn't it? The birth order, that birth order book, generations, where you are born within that family, where you are born within that generation. Methodology. One of the methodological and measurement issues involved in studying self-aware. Many of the methodological and measurement issues involved in studying self-understanding and self-regulation have been interwoven throughout our discussion of substantive concerns. In many cases, what appears as deficient and inadequate methodology is a direct function of ill-defined constructs and the lack of comprehensive theoretical context. The use of more delimited, more precise constructs is necessary. The grand theories that have undergirdled previous research are no longer sufficient. More integrated and comprehensive theories must clearly define each structure and process in terms of pattern of development. One proposed framework for cognitive development focuses on one, sequence. What is the order in which development occurs? Two, synchronicity. What developments occur at the same time as others? And three, constraint. All of the possible developments which are most likely to occur. They're trying to figure out how to predict our behavior all the way back in the 70s and 80s and before and now, and they've gotten a lot further than they did back then. Efforts to formulate theoretical paradigms that reflect the dynamic interdependence between self-system and social system also would be particularly useful. In Carroll's four-stage model and her more recent efforts at further discrimination among the various influences and skill components constituting self-management represent noteworthy examples. A further point follows from one general limitation of many self-concept theories that have stressed the importance of an individual's internal processes while neglecting other objectively measurable variables. Such variables include the individual's previous experience, his or her objective characteristics, individual differences, and differences in significant features of the social environment, for example, the family configuration. While the effect of environmental factors on cognitive development has received considerable attention, developmental theorists must now specify how these effects contribute to change in the organization of behavior. To reiterate, the case for more innovative study design emphasized throughout this volume. To adequately chart developmental progress, longitudinal designs are useful. This necessitates, among other things, developmental models and measures that are appropriate to the abilities children of different ages possess. Closely related to this is the need for designs that can better accommodate this dynamic interaction between the self system and the social system. Admittedly, this is a major dilemma for psychology in general, and one that requires considerable ingenuity as well as methodological sophistication. Studies conducted within the natural context of middle childhood that more closely approximate the child's natural life experience would be potentially useful addition to the research. I bet it would. More detailed methodological suggestions and guidelines can be found in the work of Carey, which addresses the measurement needs of research on children's self-management, and in research by Wiley, which explores the difficulties in assessing self-concept. Conclusion. And now we want a lot more research. How do we get them? How do we get them? This chapter reviews the major efforts concerned with the content and function of self-concept in children ages 6 to 12. We've combined two previously disparate literatures, one on self-understanding and self-knowledge, and one on self-regulation, and have tried to demonstrate that the study of what children know about themselves becomes most useful when it is linked with past behavior and perceptions and its role in ongoing and future behavioral regulation. Conversely, we have stressed that a complete understanding of the process of behavioral regulation will require an understanding of what children know about themselves, what rules, standards, values, and goals they have for themselves, and how this knowledge is used to, what does that say, control behavior. We're giving it to them. They know all the things. They know all about us. An interweaving of these two areas of self-understanding and self-regulation will result in a richer, more dynamic, and more interactive formulation of self-concept, one in which self-concept can be analyzed as both a social consequence and a social force. In outlining the theoretical and empirical work on self concept, we've emphasized the importance of viewing self concept as being determined by both an individual and a social system needs and goals. At any point in the individual's life, the current self concept reflects an organization and integration of the salient self perceptors or perceptions. Many of these self perceptions are determined by the reactions of others. The result is that the content of self knowledge and the way this knowledge is invoked to regulate behavior are likely to be continually changing as children mature and their social environments change or expand. In middle childhood, the development of self concept requires that children develop a relatively stable and comprehensive understanding of themselves, that they refine their understanding of how the social world works, and they develop standards and expectations for their own behavior, and that they develop strategies for controlling or managing their behavior. Changes in the child, cognitive development, and changes in the social environment, going to school, can be analyzed for their likely impact on the various components of self concept. As indicated by our review on the literature of self understanding, much is known about the concept, about the content of self concept. What is missing, however, is a broader perspective on self understanding, one that includes an examination of children's knowledge by their motives, goals, standards, and strategies for self regulation, the role of emotional content on self concept, and the relationship between knowledge of affective states and behavioral regulation are also in need of greater specification. Understanding these additional aspects of self knowledge will enable us to specify more fully the role of self concept in the regulation of behavior and to understand how self concept changes in response to the social environment. With respect to behavioral regulation, a number of theoretical perspectives, many quite similar, attempt to explain how children gain control of their behavior. These general approaches to self management have been quite global in their analysis of self control. More detailed empirical work on particular self management tasks is clearly needed. Moreover, research on self management could be more closely tied to the research on self knowledge. Finally, the research on self regulation should be expanded beyond studies concerned solely with the achievement and performance. Despite some significant gaps, our understanding of the role of the individual in regulating his or her own behavior is considerable compared with our understanding of the role of the social system. Research has implicated the social system in behavior has seldom been systematic. In part, this is due to the lack of good conceptual models relevant to the problem. From the work of behaviorists and cognitive behaviorists on self control, we have some knowledge of how minor changes in the very constrained environment influence behaviors. With respect to the larger social environment, much less exists. Rosenberg's work involving social class differences is an exception, but it has been confined to low self esteem. In developing better models of social system influence on behavior, the range of links between cognitive development in the children and social developments should be extensively explored. For example, it it is often asserted that children will not engage in social comparison or self criticism before they are cognitively able to take the perspective of another. The configuration of the social environment, however, may markedly facilitate or impair this cognitive development. Oh, look at that. It can compromise it. For example, a child in a family with three other children may be required to take the perspective of another much sooner than that of an only child. In general, the social environment should not be construed as a monolithic external factor that impinges on a fairly stable self. Instead, it can be more productively viewed as shaping or creating the social self and in turn as being structured by the individual. More models of the mutual and reciprocal influences between the self system and the social system should provide an understanding of how correlation between the two systems is achieved and how individuals become members of society or social beings. While we have some understanding of how the school age child gains a coherent and stable view of self, we know much less about how the child gains social knowledge and develops interpersonal standards and individual strategies for the control of behavior. Above all, we have stressed that in this chapter, we need to locate children within their broader social contexts, regardless of the particular phenomenon being analyzed, and the value of studying self concept in relation to the regulation of behavior. Quite simply, our review suggests that the nature or content of self-concept should not be studied apart from its social origins or its specific behavioral functions of the individual. And as you can see, there are lots of references. Hopefully you read, what I read. You hear what I hear. Do you hear what I hear? They want to pick us, the crap, apart. They want to know everything about us. We're a lot more controllable when they know all of our dreams and desires. And keeping in mind our ages and stages makes that, well, all that more easy to do. And that concludes the Rotten Reads Self-Understanding and Self-Regulation. I hope you found those as interesting as I did. You can comment into the chat ideas that make you, that you think of, or, things you'd like to challenge or correct, or what have you learned? What do you know? Share away.